You know that says it all pretty much right there. 'Cause love is everything, I mean. The world revolves around love. You know, and if it's love for your family or your wife. George Strait, the king of country music, has amassed 60 number one hits in his 71 years. His musical achievements have brought him numerous accolades, but his 52-year marriage to Norma, whom he describes as the first girl I ever loved, stands as his most precious accomplishment. At 71, he's finally letting the world in on the truth. And once you heard how his voice broke a little when he said it, you'll definitely be tearing up by the end of this video and seeing George Strait as a man who carried a love story so powerfully for decades. From classmates to soulmates, a small town boy named George and a sweet girl named Norma met in a sleepy little town called Pearsall, Texas. Now Pearsall isn't some glamorous bustling city. It's one of those places where everybody knows everybody, where your neighbor's dog is practically your dog too. And Friday night football games are pretty much sacred. That's where this whole love story started. Can you believe that? One of country music's most iconic love stories didn't begin with sparks flying or some grand romantic gesture, no. It started with two kids just growing up in the same town, bumping into each other in the school hallways like it was no big deal. George once said, "We knew each other forever growing up in a small town." And honestly, that line just says it all. They weren't strangers. They weren't swept off their feet in some dramatic movie scene. They were just familiar, like familiar. The kind of familiar where you know what someone's grandma makes for Sunday dinner, or what kind of pickup truck they've been driving since junior year. It wasn't some instant fairy tale thing. It was slow, natural, like a friendship that quietly tiptoes into something more when you're not even paying attention. You know how sometimes the best connections are the ones that sneak up on you. That's exactly what happened here. At 71 years old, George Strait, the king of country music, just dropped a confession that nobody saw coming. For decades, fans thought they knew everything about his life, his career, and his love story. But now, out of nowhere, he's opened up about someone he's never talked about like this before. Stick around till the end, because when you hear what George has finally said, it might just break your heart in the most beautiful way. Back in high school, George barely gave Norma a second thought. He straight up said, "I never really even thought anything about her." But even though he wasn't struck by Cupid's arrow, right away they still had that small town bond. The kind that runs deep, because it's built on shared experiences and similar upbringings. It was like they just got each other, without even needing to explain much. But here's where it gets really interesting. Their love story almost didn't happen. Yes, can you believe that? After all those years of being around each other, their first actual date kind of came out of the blue. George was just like, "One day I asked her out and we went on a date, casual. Right, just a simple ask. No big production." But that one little date turned into something huge eventually, because right after that, they kind of drifted apart. Life got in the way, as it does. You know how sometimes you think you'll see someone again, and then months go by, and you're like, wait, what happened? That's exactly what went down. They just lost touch, but fate wasn't done with them. One day George had this light bulb moment. He said, "I'm missing the boat here." And let me tell you, thank goodness he did. Like, can you imagine how different things would have been if he hadn't had that little epiphany? That second chance, man. It was everything. Norma, being the queen that she is, gave him another shot. She didn't hold a grudge or play hard to get. She just said yes, and they picked things up like they were always meant to. And get this, they didn't waste any time the second time around. When love hit, it hit. They eloped to Mexico on December 4, 1971. George was just 19 and Norma was only 17. That's the kind of bold, young love move you hear about in songs. And yes, they did have a more traditional church ceremony later in Texas for the folks back home. But that spontaneous trip to Mexico, That's the stuff of legends. Talk about following your heart. But hold on, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Right after getting married, George joined the U.S. Army and got stationed in Hawaii. So now you got this brand new marriage. Super young couple and bam! Long-distance military life. The whole deal. Can you even imagine? Most relationships don't survive that kind of pressure, especially not young ones. But George and Norma, they held it down. That distance, that time apart, it only made them stronger. Their foundation was already solid, but this tested it and proved it could last. The foundation of their bond. George and Norma Strait, who have been married for 52 years. Not 52 weeks, not 52 months. 52 solid years. That's more than half a century of doing life together. And what makes their stories so beautiful? It's not the fame or the packed-out concerts, or the glitz and glam of Nashville. Nope, their love didn't bloom in a spotlight. It grew out of dusty Texas roads, slow dances under open skies, and quiet mornings, filled with coffee and conversations. Theirs is the kind of love that doesn't scream. It whispers through everyday moments. You know the type. They're both small-town folks, born and raised in tight-knit communities that truly shaped who they are. George was from Purcell, and Norma, she grew up just down the road in Petty. That kind of closeness, it built something special. They weren't strangers who stumbled into each other in a big city. They were practically neighbors. George once said, "We knew each other forever growing up in a small town." Isn't that just so sweet? Like they were meant to be from the get-go. That small-town upbringing gave them something the world just doesn't hand out anymore. Values, the kind that stick. The kind that don't waver when life throws curveballs. Norma, bless her heart, carried with her the kind of wisdom you don't learn from books. Hard work, loyalty, and compassion were just second nature to her. She wasn't trying to be anyone else. She was just herself. And that was exactly what George needed, especially as he started climbing the ladder to country stardom, while the rest of the world was dazzled by his charm and cowboy boots. Norma saw the man underneath it all. Isn't that what everyone dreams of? Someone who sees you before the spotlight finds you. They didn't build their relationship around his fame. They built it around each other. Before George became the king of country music, they already had a little kingdom of their own, built on mutual respect, quiet encouragement, and those shared dreams that make to people a true team. Norma believed in him, probably before he even believed in himself. And when things got hard, as they always do in the music industry, she stood by him, not in the background, but beside him always. Have you ever heard stories about couples who seem to drift apart because their dreams don't line up? Not these two. George and Norma didn't let his success divide them. They found ways to grow side by side. Sure, the lifestyle of a touring musician doesn't exactly scream family stability, but somehow they made it work. And not just barely hanging on work. They thrived. They carved out a life that let them chase dreams without losing each other in the process. Isn't that something? And when George said, "Norma and I are so blessed that we found each other, and we're able to do all of this together," you feel that. It's not just fluff for a magazine interview. That's a man looking back on decades of love, sacrifice, and shared victories. Because their journey wasn't just about making it in music. It was about making it together. And let's talk about family, because wow, did they hold tight to that? Norma chose to be a stay-at-home mom for their son, Bubba, pouring herself into their home life until he went off to college. And even then, she didn't just fade into the background. She hit the road with George for his farewell tour in 2014. Can you imagine being that dedicated? Touring can be grueling, but she was there not because she had to be, but because they wanted to be together. That's what makes them so solid. So if anyone ever asks, what's the secret to a 52-year marriage? Just point them to George and Norman Strait. It's not magic. It's not grand gestures or red carpets. It's the quiet loyalty of small-town hearts. The resilience built from shared losses. And the simple joy of walking through life. Hand in hand, it's doing the everyday things together, even when the world's moving fast around you. And honestly, isn't that the kind of love story we all hope to write? We've heard George Strait sing about love, loss, and longing for over 40 years. But what if those songs were more real than we thought? At 71, George just revealed that one woman, just one, truly held his heart all these years. And no, this isn't a made-up country love song. This is his real story, trust me. You're going to want to stay till the very end to hear what finally made him speak out. Now, love through changing seasons. You know, if there's one couple that just makes you believe in real lasting love, the kind that weathers all kinds of storms and still holds strong like it's day one, it's George and Norma Strait. How many people can say they've been together for over 5 decades and are still going strong, hand in hand, smiling like young lovers at a high school dance? Their story isn't just sweet. It's the kind of story that makes you sit back, take a deep breath, and go, wow. That's what love is supposed to look like. It's 1971, and George and Norma, just two young sweethearts in love, decide to elope to Mexico. Yep, they skipped the fuss, ran off and got married on December 4th. But they didn't stop there. They came back home and had a little church wedding in Pearsall, Texas, with their closest family and friends. It's like they wanted to do it their way and still make it special for the people they love. Isn't that just so with them? Not long after life took off at full speed, their daughter Jennifer was born in October 1972. Barely a year after they had tied the knot. They were just kids, really young, full of dreams, with a baby in their arms and the whole world ahead of them. Then came one of those big life curveballs. George joined the United States Army. Can you imagine? One minute they're settling into family life, the next they're packing bags for Hawaii, because George got stationed at Schofield Barracks. But here's the part that really gets you. Even while serving in the military, George didn't let go of his music dreams. He started a band called Ramblin' Country while on base. That little Army-sponsored band. Yes, it was the very first spark of what would later become a legendary country music career. How wild is that their love kept growing. And in 1981, 9 whole years after Jennifer, they welcomed their son George Baba Strait Jr. Their little family was complete. But life, as it often does, threw them a heartbreaking blow. In 1986, their daughter Jennifer, just 13 years old, died in a tragic car accident in San Marcos. I mean, just think about that kind of pain. No parent should ever have to bury their child. And yet somehow they held on to each other. They didn't fall apart, they leaned into each other. And honestly, that's the kind of strength that you don't see every day. While George's career started skyrocketing, and the world began to recognize him as a country music legend, Norma chose a quieter yet equally powerful role. She was the anchor at home, the steady hand, the heart of the household. George would later share in interviews that Norma stayed home to raise Bubba and give him the kind of grounded, stable childhood that fame and touring life could never provide. That decision, that selflessness, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? But it wasn't always going to be that way. After Bubba left home to attend Texas A&M, Norma started going on the road with George. Finally, after years of being apart due to his touring life, they had a chance to travel together hand in hand, stage to stage, town to town. She was right there with him until his final tour, The Cowboy Rides Away, in 2014. Can you imagine how full circle that must have felt? To see up close what all those nights on the road were for. To watch thousands of fans pour their love into the man she believed in. From day one, it must have been magic. And then came the sweetest role of all, becoming grandparents. In early 2012, Bubba and his wife, Tamara, brought little George Harvey Strait III into the world. Oh, and let me tell you, George was so over the moon about becoming a granddad. He couldn't even hide it. He was beaming during interviews, gushing about how excited they were, especially since they were expecting a boy. Then in 2016, the family grew again when Jillian Louise was born. Just imagine the joy those two little ones brought into their lives. After all the heartbreak, after all the ups and downs, this was the sweetness they'd earned. And what's even more precious, Baba and Tamara chose to live nearby, which means George and Norma get to spend tons of time with the grandkids. George once said in an interview that they see Harvey as much as they want. Isn't that just the dream? To raise your kids, watch them grow into wonderful adults, and then be close enough to your grandkids to be part of their everyday life. It's like the best reward life could give. Today, George and Norma are still tucked away on their beloved Texas ranch. They're not chasing fame. They're not putting on a show. They're just living life, loving each other, cherishing their family, and enjoying the quiet moments that only people who've been through everything together can fully appreciate. And as they walk toward their 53rd wedding anniversary in December 2nd, 2024, their story feels less like a fairy tale and more like a real-life guide on how love, when it's true, when it's nurtured, when it's grounded in friendship and respect, can truly go the distance. So honestly, isn't that the kind of love we all secretly wish for? The kind where you're not just lovers but best friends. The kind where even the darkest nights don't break you. They just make your bonds stronger. George and Norma Strait didn't just stay together. They chose each other over and over again, through everything. And isn't that what love is really about? How law strengthened their marriage. Here are two people who've been together since high school, living a quiet life, raising their family, just doing life the best way they know how. Then one day everything changed. George and Norma Strait were that couple. High school sweethearts. Deeply private. Deeply faithful and crazy in love in that slow-burning, soul-deep way. But on June 25, 1986, their world completely shattered. That was the day they lost their 13-year-old daughter, Jennifer, in a car accident in San Marcos, Texas. How do you even breathe after something like that? How do you wake up the next morning and carry on like the world hasn't fallen apart? That kind of loss, it's not just a tragedy. It's the kind of heartbreak that could easily rip two people apart. So many couples don't make it through that kind of grief. It's the kind of sorrow that can build walls between people, even those who love each other dearly. But George and Norma, they chose a different path. They didn't let that pain build walls between them. Instead, they leaned into each other, into their faith, and into the quiet strength that had always existed in their marriage. Isn't that just incredible? Like, how many people do you know who could do that? While a lot of folks might have gotten lost in their own silent grief, George and Norma leaned on each other harder than ever before, and not just each other. And they leaned into God too. In a world that often tells us to just be strong and keep it moving, they allowed themselves to grieve together, side by side, step by step. It wasn't pretty or easy or quick, but it was real, and that's what kept them going. George, being the private man he's always been, didn't talk about it publicly much at all. He shut down in a lot of ways. You know how sometimes the pain is just too deep to even put into words. That's where he was. He even stopped giving interviews for years. "I just didn't feel like talking about it," he said, and honestly, who could blame him? Some wounds go so deep that talking about them feels like ripping them open all over again. But even in his silence, you could see how the loss shaped him. He kept singing because music was his lifeline. But he made it clear that if keeping his personal life private meant risking his career, so be it. He needed boundaries, and he honored that. And honestly, isn't there something so quietly brave about that? But here's the thing that gets me every time. Instead of turning inward forever, George and Norma chose to turn their pain into something meaningful. Almost immediately after Jennifer's passing, they created the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation, a quiet but powerful way to keep her spirit alive. I mean, can you imagine the strength it takes to do that while you're still breaking inside? Instead of being swallowed by their grief, They channeled it into helping other children. That's how they honored her. That's how they kept her light in the world. And George, in one of the very few times he spoke about it publicly, said something so tender it gives you chills. We were blessed to have been able to spend 13 years with our beautiful daughter Jennifer. That's how he chooses to remember her. With love, with gratitude. Not just for who she was, but for the time they had with her. And through the foundation, they've been able to touch so many lives. Isn't that the most beautiful kind of legacy? Of course, their faith was their anchor. Through every dark night, every quiet morning, where the house must have felt unbearably still, they held on to hope. George has said he believes they'll be reunited in heaven someday. And that belief, simple, steady, unshakable, has carried them through. He once said, I think that's what we all strive for, to get to heaven someday. And I don't know about you, but there's something really comforting about that. The idea that love, real love, doesn't end. It just changes form. And let's talk about Norma for a second. George himself has praised her again and again for being his rock. Through all the good and the bad, she stood by him. She didn't falter. She didn't let grief pull them apart. Instead, she helped hold the pieces together. Can we just pause and appreciate how rare that kind of steady love is, especially in the face of such gut-wrenching loss? So many years have gone by, but if anything, their love has only grown stronger. That's the part that gets me. Some people might look at them and only see the glamour of fame or the long-lasting music career, but at the core of it all is just two people who survived something unimaginable and came out the other side still holding hands. Doesn't that just restore a little bit of your faith in love? Even now, decades later, George still finds ways to honor his daughter. He said that his song, You'll Be There, reminds him of Jennifer. And when you listen to it, knowing that it just hits differently, every word, every note, it carries the weight of love and longing and faith. He once said, I'm a religious person. I honestly believe we will see each other in heaven someday. That belief, that hope, is still the thread that weaves their hearts together. So yeah, if you're ever wondering what real strength looks like, don't look for it in fancy speeches or grand gestures. Look at George and Norma Strait. Look at how they held each other up when life hit them with its worst. Look at how they chose love and faith and each other over and over again, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Because the real strength of a marriage, it's not measured by how happy you are during the good times. It's measured by how tightly you hold on during the worst ones. And George and Norma, they've held on like their lives depended on it. And maybe in some ways they did. George Strait is a legend. A man of few words, a voice that shaped a generation, and a heart that seemed impossible to read. But now at 71, he's opening up in a way we've never seen before. He's talking about her, the one that got away, or maybe the one who never really did. The love he never stopped thinking about. The woman who made such an impact on his life. He's only now ready to tell the world the truth. Stick around, because when George Strait speaks from the heart, it hits like a song you never forget. The confession that touched hearts. George Strait, the king of country himself, stood on that massive CMA award stage, looking out at a sea of people, most of them stars in their own right. And yet, when it came down to it, when he had the mic and the moment, he didn't just talk about the hits or the honors, or the decades of sold-out shows. Instead, he turned that spotlight straight onto the one person who's been his rock through everything. His wife Norma. Isn't that just the sweetest thing? How often do you see someone with that level of fame get up in front of the world and basically say, yeah, all this is great, but she's the real win? And let's be honest, George has always been a bit of a mystery man when it comes to his private life. For years he's kept things low-key. No tabloid drama, no oversharing. None of that, but lately, oh, he's been opening up more. Especially when it comes to Norma. And honestly, it's beautiful. It's like watching this quiet cowboy slowly let down the curtain. Just enough for us to peek into the heart of what makes his world turn. Like, doesn't it just make you melt? So at the 2024 CMA Awards, when he accepted the Willie Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award, already a huge deal, right? He stood there, took a breath, thanked everyone who helped him build his legendary career. And then his voice kind of cracked a little when he looked toward the audience and mentioned his family, and not just in passing either. He named them one by one: his son Bubba, daughter-in-law Tamara, his grandkids, Harvey and Jillian, but he lingered on Norma. Oh, he lingered, he said, but especially Norma, who supported me for just shy of 53 years in December. It's been an amazing 53 years too. I mean, chills. The kind of love and respect in that one sentence. It hits differently. And if you caught the camera shot of Norma in the crowd, you know that moment wasn't just sweet. It was sacred. You could see how much it meant to her and to everyone. Honestly, and isn't that something? Because in an industry where relationships flicker and fade faster than radio hits, here's George and Norma 53 years deep, still in love, still showing up for each other. Makes you want to believe in forever, doesn't it now? George isn't just saving those words for award shows either. Lately, he's been sprinkling in little love notes to Norma during his concerts and interviews, like he just can't help but talk about her. And it's adorable. There was this one show in Vegas. This one really got people emotional. He stopped mid-performance and shared how he and Norma had eloped to Mexico when they were just teenagers. I was 19 years old, and I knew this girl Norma. She was 17, really hot, he said, kind of smirking. And the crowd just erupted. He said it had been exactly 50 years since that day. Can you imagine standing on stage in front of thousands, looking over at the woman you've loved since you were practically kids, and serenading her with "I Cross My Heart," one of the most romantic songs in country music history? Like, come on, who's cutting onions in here? But what really makes it all so real is the way George talks about their life together. Not just the highlights, but the in-between stuff too. In interviews he said things like, "We're so blessed we found each other, and we're able to do all of this together." And you can tell he means all of it. Not just the Grammys and the gold records, but the quiet mornings, the tough years, the parenting, the growing older. He even said once, "We love each other, and we still like each other a lot." That part right there, that's the secret sauce. Because love is wonderful, but liking someone after half a century, that's the stuff that sticks. Even on Instagram, which he doesn't use a ton, but when he does it counts. George will share these little glimpses of his and Norma's life, a throwback photo here, a sweet Valentine's Day post there. He even posted a picture of the two of them meeting President George H.W. Bush, and yeah, sure, meeting a president is cool and all, but the way he framed it, it was still about them, about that shared moment. Like everything else in his life, it always comes back to her. You know what's kind of amazing? George Strait has sold over 100 million records. He's had more #1 hits than any other artist. In any genre, he's basically country music royalty. And yet, when you listen to him talk about what really matters, it's Norma, it's their partnership, their friendship, their journey. He said once, straight from the heart, "Love is the greatest gift we have." And honestly, that might be the truest lyric he's ever spoken. Even if it wasn't in a song, George Strait isn't just giving fans good music. He's giving them hope. He's showing us what it looks like to grow old with someone and still light up when you talk about them. He's reminding everyone that behind every successful man is usually a woman who's held it all together, cheered from the sidelines, and sometimes sacrificed more than we'll ever know. And in his case, that woman is Norma. And he's not afraid to let the world know it anymore. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.